All right, reading recovery friends, I think we will get things started here. And I tell you what, I'm going to take a second and close the doors up front here. First of all, I want to welcome everyone to California. Oh, you guys didn't go sightseeing today? Awesome. All right. Yay. So, all right. Listen, I'm so appreciative to see everyone out here in the audience today. I was telling some of my help desk colleagues out there, Julie and Rich, that, I certainly see a lot of faces I recognize, and I also see some faces that I don't recognize, and I think that's great. A perfect opportunity to come over to the I Love Data table and introduce yourselves to everybody at IDEC. We're really quite friendly over there, except for me. I'm kidding. But just so you know, so no one yells out any awkward questions, we are actually broadcasting on YouTube Live right now to any of our teacher leaders who are watching. So I'm going to wave to my camera right here and say hi and everything. So only easy questions today for me, okay? So first of all, yes, thank you and welcome today to coming to our Reading Recovery Myth, Legends, and Folk Wisdoms presentation. I was telling our research director, Richard Lomax, over here that, I originally designed this presentation with an audience of teachers in mind, those people who sort of bring these myth and legends to you, and I wanted to get a chance to give the same presentation to you because I think at times you guys confront these things sort of head on, and to give you some more ammunition today on how to say, no, that's not how it's going to work. We're going to do it like we're supposed to do it. So I guess what I'm saying is I feel like today I'm going to be preaching to the choir too a little bit, because I think a lot of you feel that, in general, maybe kids, all kids respond to reading recovery and everything, which is one of the sort of myths we're going to talk about today. Now, one thing we're also going to do today is that you can send me your questions anonymously online. You can use your phone, a web browser on your phone, or if you've got your computer up, you can go to this address right here. Same with our people watching online. You can go to this same address. And when you go there, you can put in this little 4-digit code, the Z496. And don't worry, I will have this address and this code on the bottom of every slide from this point forward. So you don't have to quickly write it down or anything. But I will see it on the iPad up here. Or if I don't see it, then you have a burning question, grab my attention and make sure I'm looking down at the iPad. And I will try to answer things as we go along. Or if you need me to clarify something, if I just say something that seems completely ridiculous, let me know, and I would be happy to try to clarify it. So I'll answer them as they appear. So let's get right to it, ladies. Let's talk about our myth, legends, and folk wisdoms, our data unicorns, as I like to call it. We're out in the field, and I've gathered some of these sort of folk wisdoms from conversations I've had at the consultation table out there. People have come and asked me about these things, so I thought I'd take the time and put them all together sort of like in one presentation. One of the big challenges is you kind of have to frame these folk wisdoms like, how do I ask that question using the data? So sometimes how a teacher may ask it may not be 100% how I address it with the data, but data you have to be a little more precise, and questions sometimes can be a little fuzzy. All right, so here are 4 myths we're going to talk about today. I think this one is not so much a myth, but an administrator sort of problem that some administrators, boy, when there's a teacher missing in the school one day, immediately go to that reading recovery teacher and grab them as a substitute teacher. And you know what? Don't worry, it's not going to affect anything. Everything will be A-okay, all right? Next one that we're going to talk about, that my kids are harder to work with, and they just don't respond to reading recovery. So we're going to look at like different populations of kids and see how much of this is true or not true. And then we're going to be like, you know what? He's not ready for reading recovery. He's too low. And so we're going to give this child some time to mature, okay? You know, again, so he can get a little higher and benefit from reading recovery. Which I know we're like, well, duh, why is he getting that's why he needs reading recovery. And then finally, we're going to talk about, you know, he's too young for reading recovery. Once again, we're going to give this child the gift of time. We're going to let him mature a little bit, and, you know, then he will be able to sit still for more than 10 minutes and benefit from reading recovery. So a lot of the slides today are going to use, I'm going to use the OS total score. And just to quickly review, it's a composite score where we take all 6 tasks of the observation survey, we add them together to get a raw score. Then we go to our the Stay-Nines and Norms document, and we look up the scale score based off of a raw score. And those scores are between 0 and 800. And all today, what it just really means, it's just an approximation of the child's early literacy awareness. So, you know, the higher the score, the more proficient the child is. I think another way that you can think about it is it kind of is like a standardized test score. We can do things like actually we can compute like how many years of growth a child has made. Or it's a wonderful way to look at sort of who's starting farther down in the hole. It helps reveal that information a little bit better. All right, so we're going to get right to it. Using reading recovery teachers as substitutes has no effects on outcomes whatsoever. This is an easy one to start with, just one chart we're going to look at. So I think when people think about this, the assumptions that they are making, because the reading recovery teacher is right there, and you know, she's only working with 4 students today, so we're just going to yank her out and put her in and have her do she's kind of that easy to go to person there. And that, you know, the other assumption is that, you know, there's going to be no effect. You know, it's only a few lessons that we're going to miss. It's not going to have much of an effect. So what I have here is a chart, and it's showing the percentage of students who were discontinued and recommended versus the number of lessons missed. So at the bottom of here, going along the bottom, we're showing number of lessons missed all the way up to 16 or more. And then the blue area, the solid blue area, represents the percentage of kids who were discontinued. And then the striped area, the blue striped area, is the percentage of the kids that are recommended. And so I think we can see a clear trend that as a teacher misses more lessons, that the teacher is unavailable. I'm not worrying about the student being unavailable right now. As the teacher becomes more unavailable, that, you know, the number of students that they are able to discontinue decreases. And I think the important thing so with the teacher missing 0 lessons, you know, she's discontinuing, if she was able to serve all 8 of her children, she's discontinuing 6 out of her 8 children here at this point at the very end. Over on the other extreme, she's only discontinuing 4 out of the 8 children. So what one administrator put it to me, and I'm sorry that it's not getting up on the screen there, what I'm saying down at the bottom is that when a teacher misses 8 lessons, they are regularly misdiagnosing, not so much that they're discontinuing one less, but they're misdiagnosing regularly one child. You know, one child that could have really been discontinued is being misdiagnosed as recommended. And then at the other extreme, what I'm saying is that now the teacher is now misdiagnosing, or the team is misdiagnosing 2 children regularly. So it does. We know it. I mean, reading recovery teachers are most effective when they're teaching reading recovery, right? I mean, this is not any earth-shattering news. So I will offer these conclusions that, you know, as teachers miss lessons, we are more likely to misdiagnose our children. And that, you know, like I said, at the 8 lessons missed, we're regularly misdiagnosing one child, and at 16 or more, which is it's uncommon. But when you get to there, if you have someone that's really just pulling that teacher out, they're regularly misdiagnosing 2 children when they get to those 16 or more lessons missed. All right. Okay, we're moving on to the next one. Next one. Does anyone want to ask a question? Okay, moving on. See, notice how I didn't give any time for anyone to raise hands. No. All right, my kids are harder to work with reading recovery, or they're harder to work with, and they don't respond to reading recovery. So I think, from what I gathered from conversations with people, what teachers are sometimes are making these assumptions that for certain populations of students that not many children are going to discontinue. They take longer to discontinue. They don't make as much growth, and in general, they're not responding to reading recovery. So on these next charts, I've picked several sort of categories of students just based off of conversations with teacher leaders. And so the first chart we're going to look at is the percentage of children who are discontinued and recommended, but we're going to look at it by different student populations. So I have our all reading recovery children, our ELL children, free and reduced lunch children, all minorities together, African American males, and Hispanic male students. The blue is the percentage of children who are discontinued. Red is the percentage who are recommended. And I mean, we do see a little bit of a trend that, yes, you know what, our Hispanic males and our African American males, yes, they have a slightly lower discontinuing rate, higher recommending rate. So I think sometimes myths start with a kernel of truth, and then they kind of blossom on their own. So yeah, I think what we see here is that some populations come with us with different challenges, and we have to be able to respond to challenges. I see the question. I'm going to get through this slide and I'll answer this question. So we may have to think differently how we work with children. So I think this myth starts right here. Somebody said, oh look, my Hispanic males, they're troublemakers, those boys, and they're just difficult to teach, gosh darn it. And so brings us to the next assumption that certain populations, they take longer to discontinue. So, these Hispanic male boys, they're just going to take forever to get out of reading recovery. So here we are. Here's a chart that is plotting the average number of weeks to discontinue, and I've got both first and second round in here in this chart. It's by the same categories. We have our all children, our ELL, our minorities, free and reduced lunch, African American males, and our Hispanic males. There's a difference. So the least amount is all our kids. The most is our Hispanic males or African American males. That's a difference of 0.3 weeks, which if you convert it to lessons, and you can tell me if I'm not really doing this right, but that's 1.5 days, which is equal to 1.5 lessons, which is 45 minutes. So, I may be oversimplifying, but at most it's taking 45 minutes longer to discontinue some of our kids. I don't think that's an egregious amount. So make sure you tell your teachers that when they complain. You just work with them for 45 minutes longer. I know it's not as easy as that. I'm gonna save this question until I get to the end of this section because it's a little bit it goes back to the first topic, and I'll get to that. I see it. All right, so then we're going to go to the assumption that, okay, since they're harder to teach, these kids aren't going to make as much growth. Now, I know that this chart looks a little ugly, but we will get through it together. Let me explain it. What we are looking at is the growth on the OS total score from the start of the school year to the end of the school year. And I have, unfortunately, it's at the bottom of the screen. We have our same populations. We have our ELL kids. We have our we have our free and reduced lunch, all minorities. Thank you very much, sir. And then we have our African American males, our Hispanic males. And then I've thrown this one on here, the average first grader, our national random sample. For each of our other categories, we have our discontinued children and our recommended children for each of our various student populations. Now, so that's what I was showing at the bottom. That's our average first grader. So you'll notice that each bar has two numbers in it. The first number is the actual amount of growth that the in total score points. So for example, on our all discontinued children, they made growth of 160 points from the start of the school year to the end of the school year. That bar is 160 points tall. And then the second number is the amount of growth that they made in terms of years compared to the average first grader. So our all discontinued children made 1.4 years worth of growth compared to the average first grader. All I have to say is, wow. I mean, all the kids are showing growth. And who are our biggest, making the most growth? Our ELL children right here. This is our ELL children, discontinued children. 1.5 years worth of growth. Even our recommended children, our hardest to teach ones, are making more than a year's worth of growth when you look at the OS total score. That they have come such a long way. You know, they had to start so far down low that they've come such a long way. So I'll put a little black line up there. Yes, you know, our African American males and Hispanic males make slightly, they don't quite get as high, but it's not a huge difference at the end of the school year. You know, discontinuing is not based on the score. We all know it's a lot of things when it comes to whether we're going to discontinue a child or not. So I'm saying to you, these children are just about making the same, they're responding. So let's just offer my conclusions. Remember that I'm assuming that people are making these four following assumptions: that not as many children discontinue, they take longer, they don't make as much growth, and they don't respond. And I say that, you know, yes, some populations come to our reading recovery with bigger deficits to overcome, or different challenges, but at most it takes 45 minutes longer to discontinue some of the hardest to teach populations, and that your teachers are effective at fostering growth no matter the child. And I know I'm preaching to the choir on this one and everything, and that this last one I've put together just talking with some other teacher leaders about, like, how do you, this last bullet is that, you know, they would tell me that, you know, just like when it comes to sports, sometimes you have to use different strategies against different teams. Different children require different strategies for you to work with them, and so you have to think and plan differently. So I think this is where this myth starts, that somebody's not wanting to strategize a little bit more. All right, let me go back to my, we got first question here. It goes back to our missed lessons. It says, can teachers make up missed lessons by providing 2 lessons a day? I don't know if I really have an answer for that, whether going to 2 lessons, like if you just do 2 lessons per day, will have an effect on it, on a child. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm just going to... Anybody? You think that 2 lessons could? I see some heads nodding.
Yep.
Okay.
Depends on how much time they have to reflect on their data.
Okay.
And plan for the next lesson.
Don, I see you raising your hand back there too.
I'm just going to quote one from us. He said that it's the number of lessons per week that matters.
Number of lessons per week that matters. Excellent. All right, I'm going to put that one in mind. All right. A quick clarification of what 160 represents, please, on this part. So it's not that I can give you a quick that's a very good question, how to put it into words. So the total score doesn't have a real meaning in like a specific, I can't tell you, having 160 points on the total score doesn't mean like a child has grown 10 text levels or anything like that. I don't have a copy of a paper that Dr. D'Agostino wrote, but it has a chart that shows, and it's not a chart that's so much about how much growth they made. It's where they end, and it shows what kind of scores on the observation survey kind of correlate with different scores on the OS total score. So, like, for an example, and don't quote me on this, I don't have the paper right in front of me. Like, you know, maybe somewhere around a 540 are children that are reading at a text reading level of 16, but have a very high writing vocabulary. And and other things. So I'm going to make a note to send it's in one of the reading recovery journals and everything. So I'm going to make a note to send that out to everybody. That was like the worst answer ever, I know. Okay, so the next two myths we're going to use. Hey, you guys remember the random assignment study? That study you all loved? So we're going to use some of the data from the random assignment study. And the reason why we're going to do it is because what do we do for teachers when it comes to the student selection process? We train them to select the lowest, the hardest to teach children first. And so it biases the data. I mean, so you're always getting your hard children in the fall. And that's okay. There's nothing bad about that. That's just, it makes the next two scenarios difficult where we're trying to see, we're going to simulate what happens when we delay children, like when we give them a few months to mature, and we're going to see what happens. So the random assignment study gives us that opportunity, because remember the random assignment study, our children were randomly put into get reading recovery in the fall or get reading recovery in the spring, and it eliminates that student selection bias. So like I'm saying up here, the other thing too is that fall students always start lower and they always finish slightly lower at the end of the year, and we usually get we'll get unbalanced numbers if we try to do it with the usual data. So how do we do this? Like I said, we're going to do it with the random assignment study. Removes the bias. Best way to examine these scenarios. So just to give you an idea of like what the difference in the data looks like between students who are typically selected following selection protocols and what the random assignment data looks like. So once again, here's a chart showing the growth from the start of the school year at the bottom of the bar, each bar, to the end of the school year. And we're looking at first round children and second round children. And this is using the OS total score once again. So once again, we're teaching the hardest to teach children first, right? I mean, that's normal. This is what the typical data looks like. And then in second round, we get kids who are not quite as hard to teach. And the first round kids always finish slightly lower than the second round kids. That's just what the normal data looks like. This is not bad that they're finishing lower. This is just how it is. So this is random assignment study data. Same thing. Kids served in the fall, children served in the spring, but they were randomly assigned when to get reading recovery. So first of all, the kids start at about the same place and they finish at the same exact place. So we've got two equal groups that we can compare, okay? And this is why we're using it. So in these next two scenarios, we're going to see that what happens when we follow the selection protocol, and then what happens when we believe the myth and we simulate modifying the selection protocol based off of our myth. And does this modification, does it benefit the student? Because this is what our teachers are saying. Listen, if we just delay them a little bit, it's going to have these magical benefits. Problem solved. I'm your hero. Okay? So that's what we're going to see. So the next one is, listen, this poor young boy right here, he's not ready for reading recovery because he's too low. He's too low for reading. I mean, we know that's ridiculous. All right? So I think when someone comes up to you and says this, that, delaying, that their assumption is that delaying is going to benefit the child. It is this wonderful gift of time that we are giving to the child. And that if we do this delay, this child's going to have higher scores at the end of the year, and they are going to be more likely to discontinue in the spring. I don't know if these exact thoughts go into someone's head, but this is how we have kind of, we should see these benefits. So we're going to look at the data. We're going to look at fall students served in the fall, students served in the spring. I'm going to use students who had a total score of less than 349, which is the lowest 5%, kids in the 5th percentile. We're going to look at discontinued students, and we'll do that comparison. We'll look at what happens when we follow the selection process, and then we'll do a simulated modification of the selection process, and do we see a benefit over on this side or not? This is what a child in with a 349 or lower looks like on their OS scores, just so you get a sense of what we're dealing with. Pretty low, right? So the children should have a higher score. So if we're giving the child the gift of time, they should have higher scores at the end of the year. So here's our typical data. We're looking at children served in the fall, children served in the spring, and we're looking at our typical data, teachers who are following the selection protocol, okay? So we kind of see, remember we're selecting really low kids here, so they're starting at the same spot, but teachers following the selection protocol still look like they're picking the hardest to teach children first, because we're seeing that pattern still. They don't quite make it as far by the end of the school year as our second round children, but they make great gains. So I think if this myth were true, we should see that bar tick up a little bit, because we're gift of time, more growth, okay? So here we go, random assignment study data. Kids are starting at the same spot and they finish at exactly the same spot. The spring children are not any higher. In fact, it's not a significant amount, but they're slightly lower than the fall children. So it has no benefits. I mean, the lack of an aha moment here is what's important, which is I'm trying to highlight here, is it didn't have any benefits whatsoever. That bar was not any higher than our fall children. So no, it does not promote any extra growth. All right, are they more likely to discontinue? So here is our kids the teachers following the usual selection protocol. Our fall children, we normally discontinue about almost 30% in the spring, about almost 34%, 30% in the fall, almost 34% in the spring. That's when we're following the usual selection process, that's what it looks like. So once again, I think if this myth were true, it's going to say, well, we should see more discontinued children in the spring. We should see that the difference between the blue bar and the red bar should increase. All right? And it's an important point, because when we look at the random assignment study data, when we simulate having low children in the spring, the difference between the two bars decreases. It becomes the same. So there is no effect. It has no effect. So once again, delaying this child is not benefiting the child in any way. So let's go ahead and give our conclusion. So the assumption is that the delay is the gift of time, right? Higher scores at the end of the school year, more likely they discontinued in the spring. I'm so glad we did this, because I'm your hero teacher now, and it's a miracle. But really, we see that delaying does not change the student growth. The kids end up at the same exact spot. Delaying does not increase the chances that they'll discontinue. It makes them just about the same. And that, delaying the students just because they're too low has no tangible benefits. So, yes.
Can you go back to that slide before where you showed bars? Okay. I maybe can't see back here, but it looks like here, the other two columns, the name, the random sample. No?
These two right here? Right here.
That looks a lot lower.
So the important part is not that the percentages themselves are lower. So I think what you're seeing that the percentages are lower is because in the random assignment study, we have a lot of brand new teachers that were a part of the I3 grant that were coming in, and they were all in their training year and everything. We had a very high proportion of those. So that effect I think you're seeing is because we have in-training teachers. The difference is that I think when a teacher thinks that delaying a child is going to benefit them, that what we should see is that there should be an increase in the difference between the blue bar and the red bar. But when we simulate when we see what happens when we delay children, it doesn't increase that difference. It makes them exactly the same. It's having no benefit to them.
Well, I think what happens at the schools that I work in is that it's not that the kids are too low and they need to give time. It's that they don't slide, or is this the categories that they would fit into?
No, I think they would fit, no, they would be in this category right here as well. I mean, I think it's the same reasoning that, someone thinks that, well, if we just give them a chance to learn more English, they'll do better. And you're like, well, what a better way to learn English than to come into reading recovery.
And I think that's the piece that's missing, that administrators and other teachers don't understand, because on a one-on-one situation, you have a lot of opportunity to develop language.
Yeah.
Not just sit in the classroom or go to an EL group that has 20 other kids where you don't speak as much as you do on a one-on-one with a teacher.
Yeah.
Who could be more aware of letting that child speak.
So would a more effective, more meaningful set of slides being my kids are too low because they're ELL children?
Yeah.
Is that what I'm, okay. Suggestion heard. All right. All right, so here's our final one, and then you all can go to the pool and relax and everything, or stop by the data table. And we're friendly over there, I promise. So the last one, he's too young for reading recovery. And so I think the assumptions are exactly the same. That one, delaying the child's interest to reading recovery, it's a gift of time. It benefits the child. All right, we're going to give the child time to mature, and that the end result will be is that we will see this child make greater gains in the spring when they finally get reading recovery, and they will be more likely to discontinue in the spring. And so we're going to look at a couple groups of data. We're going to group students by two age groups. We're going to look at children who are 6 and under at the start of the school year. And then I'm also just going to put children who are 6 and older at the start of the school year. So all of these slides are going to look at children's age at the start of the school year, not when they enter reading recovery, their age at the start of the school year. And once again, we're going to use the typical data. When teachers are following the selection protocol, what does it look like? And then we'll compare it to the random assignment study data, simulating this delaying of children going into reading recovery. So our assumption is because the child is too young, we're going to delay, and that delay should give them higher scores at the end of the year. So what we are looking at is the growth of the OS total score from the start of the school year at the bottom of each bar to the end of the school year, to the top of each bar. And I have these two bars are our kids who are 6 years old or younger, and we have children who were served in the fall, and then children served in the spring, and then we have kids who were older than 6, served in the fall and served in the spring. So, this is the typical data when your teachers are following the selection protocol, and it mirrors what we looked at about 4 slides ago, what the typical data looks like. We're picking the hardest kids to work with first, and our first round kids always finish slightly lower than our second round kids. That's, this is not a picture that surprises us. So if this myth were true, once again, I think we would see this bar in the spring for our young kids. It should shoot up and be a little higher. And so here is the random assignment study data. So these are our first round fall children less than 6, spring children less than 6 years old, and it's exactly the same. They come out exactly the same. It also means that your teachers, when they're put under the gun, they probably only had 13 weeks to teach these children. Man, they responded and really did it. Same effect over here. We didn't see. I put this over here to see if giving a slightly older child even more time would have a similar somewhat of effect. And it's the same. They all end up at the same spot. This gift it is not the gift of time here. In fact, they finish slightly lower, but it's not a significant amount lower. They finish like where our first rounders would finish. More likely to discontinue. All right, so here's our less than 6 and less years old, and our served in fall, served in spring. So we shouldn't be too surprised that we have slightly less discontinued children in the fall and a little more discontinued children in the spring. If we bring up our random assignment, so if this was true, once again, we should see this discontinue rate in the spring go up. So here is our random assignment study data, and it flips. It flips a little bit. So we're discontinuing more children in the fall and less children in the spring. And you see that same pattern repeated with the older children too. So it's not it's not a detriment, but people are maybe being misdiagnosed there in the spring, when if they were served in the fall, they might have been able to do it. So I'll offer my conclusions. So once again, like we said, this is the gift of time. We think this is what people think. We're giving these child a gift here. Higher scores, more likely to discontinue. And the data suggests that delaying does not guarantee higher scores at the end of the year. It does not increase a child's chances of discontinuing, and that delaying a child because they're just too young really has no tangible benefits to the child. We're not giving them the gift of time. So my final thoughts on all this, I think experience and intuition are all very important in reading recovery, because as I've done these I Love Data Friday videos, I've learned a lot about how you guys are observing children and everything, and these observations and intuitions are very important. But sometimes, and that some children come with reading recovery with some pretty significant deficits. But I think, as you all know, we have to be careful of these sweeping generalizations about children, that he's just too young, you know. But we need to use our data, the selection process, to make that informed decisions. And the good news is that the data shows that for the most part, teachers are following that selection protocol. And to me, it looks like it's effective. I mean, when you look at it compared to the random assignment study data, when we simulate those situations, the teachers are effective at identifying the hardest to teach children first and work with them. So I say that these folk wisdoms, they just simply aren't true. They don't benefit the children, and that all student population, you should be very confident in saying that all student populations that are eligible for reading recovery, they respond to reading recovery, and your teachers are good at fostering that growth, and that they don't need the benefit of time, they need the benefit of reading recovery. So, thank you. Questions? Donna, I see a question in the back there.
Can you give us a quick tutorial of the US norms chart where the OS data, the numbers that you were using come from?
Absolutely. So how do we convert it? How do we convert the total score or raw score into a scale score?
Yes.
I think they forgot to turn the air conditioning on in here. I'm glad you guys stayed awake for that, or for this. All right, let's see. Let's go US norms. There it is. All right, so our total score is down at the end. I'm going to quickly scroll. Oh, there it is. I went right by it. That's the percentile rank. There we go. All right, so to convert a child's, to get a total score for a child, you take all 6 tasks of the observation survey and you add them together. And this gives you a raw score. So you see on this, in this chart right here, we have several columns that have this raw score title. It starts over on the left at 0. It goes down, I think, across to the next page, but it comes back up to the top, so it makes like a up-down motion like that. So let's say I add a child's scores all together, and the 6 scores add up to, say, a value of 107. So I'm going to find 107 in one of these raw score columns. There it is, 107. You look one column to the right into the scale score column, and that is the child's total score. So in this case, the score is 398. There's 107 when we added the 6 values together, and it has a total score of 398. Now our computer system does that automatically for like table 3.7 in your report. You don't have, it computes the total score for you, and in your data dumps as well.
Is the scale score to give value to like text reading in a way that's?
No, oh boy, see, Richard, aren't you glad I took this race analysis class? Let's see how well I can answer this.
Could you repeat the question?
So the question was, how do I find out a child's total score? How do we compute a child's total score? How do? Oh, your question. I'm sorry. What?
My question was why or how, and if that's because they're allowing for a difference in text, like the text.
Why? Yeah. Why? So why do we take that raw score and convert it into a scale score? So, well, that's a very good question. And Richard, I'm probably going to drag you into this a little bit if you want. Well,
the raw score total by itself doesn't mean anything anyway, because it's taking into account all 6 scores. I kind of think of the scale score as like if you've taken the SAT or something like that, the GRE, they have sections and you get a scale score of like 0 to 800. So like the GRE, at least when I took it, the max was 1600, 800 verbal, 800 quantitative. So it's kind of on that scale. Now, of course, in either case, these are total scores, you know, whether you put them on one scale or the other. And so that means that a child doing better on one of the 6 tasks versus another gets taken into account. So someone could be low on 5 of them, pretty high on 6.
if they do really good on like writing vocabulary.
So there are a lot of different profiles you could have.
Do you need?
Doesn't it have to do with each test has different number of points that you can get, and then you have to convert them into equal intervals? So the scale score is
The scale score in the end does give you nice equal intervals and everything, and it also takes into account, though a recent paper by Jerry and Emily is that technically the text reading level, it's a categorical, it doesn't, you know, what are we counting in text reading level? We're not really,
well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Apples and oranges.
yeah, and it helps sort of, I don't want to say gloss all over that, because we're not really trying to gloss over it,
So
but
you're not glossing over, you're converting the scores into equal intervals, so you're making them so they all are able to be compared.
so I'm going to repeat this for our YouTube viewers, because I like your answer better than mine. So one of the, I do, I don't know everything up here, that we, what people are saying from the audience is that, you know, we're using the total score because it helps sometimes convert things that are scores that are not in equal intervals. For example, like the text reading level, it's not measuring something specific, but it gives us a nice equal interval scale. And the other thing that I like is it gives us, you can't see with the other scores who was starting lower than another person. Is the other thing, is the other benefit that it gives us. You know, someone who has an Ohio word test of 1 and another child who has an Ohio word test of 1, who's lower? I don't know. But with the OS total score, it gives us that nice sense of like who is starting lower and who is starting higher.
And then the next piece of this is the cutoff score, right? Like when you have your scale score, then there's a range, like in the fall. Isn't there like a table that has the cutoff score for being?
Yeah, there's stain on this, and then you can convert. them.
Yeah, this is right, okay. Stay nice.
Use that to,
Right.
Yes, we have there are stay nines for the, you guys are talking about these.
Yep.
So the question is, just so people online heard that, do we have the stay 9 groups for our OS total score? And yes, that's also in the document as well.
So the raw scores that you're converting, are those the stay nines from each of the tasks?
No, they're just the actual scores from each task. So if a child got a 3 on the text reading level and a 10 on the Ohio word test, and I'm only going to use 3 as an example, and 50 on the writing vocabulary, you would take 3 plus 10 plus 50. Add that together. Except we would add the 3 other scores as well.
Okay, I'm sorry. So there's no weight for the text level. So if a child wrote 6 words in writing vocabulary and had a 0 text level, it would be the same score as the child who read a text level 6 and wrote.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to completely admit some ignorance here because I think it's important to fail fast. Being a software engineer and not a statistician, I can't talk too long about the OS total score and how it's done using a type of analysis. It's called race analysis, and it has been designed and is used for these very scenarios that you all are asking about. These sort of unequal interval scales, and taking things that are like these partial credit items and making a nice evenly distributed scale of scores.
Okay, but getting the score, if I just took my child's test and I counted out the things that they got right, assuming text level would be, if they write a text level 6, it would be a 6. So those would be just flat points, right? And that's how I'm figuring out that first chart. So as an example, just using 3, they had a text level 6, they had
Plus
0 writing vocabulary.
that would still, 6. That would still be 6,
Okay,
and then
a 1 on hearing, recording, sounds words, just for ease. So they got a total of 7.
7.
But the same child could get a 0 text reading, 6 hearing, recording, or writing vocabulary, and 0 on, and still was 6. Okay.
Yes.
That was my question.
Yes. Different combinations of the OS scores will give you the same total score. Don't worry about it so much, folks. It's not meant to help you like select students or I don't even know if you wanted to talk to administrators about it with the total score, but it's a good way to sort of get a general feel of a child's overall early literacy awareness. And then on Thursday, Richard's going to be talking about the recent article that Emily Rogers and Jerry D'Agostino wrote in the, what was the Reading Recovery, not Reading Recovery, Journal of Reading, the Reading Research Quarterly, about the title's a little misleading. It was like addressing inadequacies of the observation survey, but it actually is a very good piece that talks about the total score and how it's a valid measure to use and addresses some criticisms of the observation survey. Jeez, man, you guys are like... Yes, ma'am.
I don't really know, are the stay 9 scores updated now?
No, these we have not updated any stay 9 scores for this year.
Like they're from,
I believe from 2009, 2010.
so we're still using the same 2009, 2010?
Yes.
Just to clarify.
Yes.
In our observation survey book, are the same cutoff scores and stay nines, are those the same as what is now being used?
I don't know about the various, I don't have a copy of the observation survey, so I don't know what's in the current edition of that. Yeah, I'm not.
Third edition is the what's
Third edition?
edition is, second edition is not.
Third edition is the 2009?
Yeah, the most recent one matches what's on there.
So for those online, the third edition of the Early Literacy Observation Survey book has these current stay 9s, the ones I'm showing on the screen, in there right now. All right, any softball questions? No, keep them coming. All right, well, then I will say thank you, everybody, today for your time and willingness to give up some time by the pool or doing a little sightseeing and everything. And thank you for the suggestions. And I actually do appreciate your hard questions. Keeps me thinking up here, and it tells me what you guys are thinking about. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Stop by the table. We're giving away stickers and tattoos, temporary tattoos. So. I'm not kidding. We have tattoos.